Welcome, everyone, to the somethingth episode of the Argument Clinic podcast. This is a live episode from the Woodward first and second year Novice Nationals. I'm joined by my lovely podcast co-host, Lawrence Zhao. Lawrence, if you could eat one M&M-sized horse or 20 horse-sized M&Ms, which one would you do?
20 horse-sized M&Ms?
You definitely die. Wrong answer. Okay. We're also joined by esteemed podcast influencer and influence, Jacob Nails. How are you, Jacob?
I'm dandy.
You're dandy. Is that a description of your personality or a job title?
It's a description of my present state of being. I'm doing splendidly at the moment.
Excellent. Well, this week we are live from the Woodward debate tournament. If I can remember, first of all, we are a podcast for we are a Lincoln Douglas Debate Fundamentals podcast. Whether you are a grizzled veteran of the tournament scene or a novice for your first tournament, this is the podcast for you. I'd also like to remember to shout out our sponsor, Victory Briefs, which is a premier debate camp and briefs subscription service in the United States, of which Lawrence knows exists.
It does indeed exist.
Jacob Nails also worked at the Victory Briefs Institute. How did you find your time there, Jacob?
It was enjoyable. I think it's a very solid camp.
Did you learn some kids?
I learned some kids a thing or two, let me tell you.
Okay. So today, we are just here because finally, Lawrence and Martin are in the same place. You may notice that our audio quality is slightly different from the way that it normally is. And it will be difficult for us to know how good or bad it will be until the conclusion of the tournament. But we are currently recording from Lawrence's phone. There's a little lapel mic attached to his laptop. A truly guerrilla situation here at Novice Nationals. So if you have any complaints about the audio quality of the podcast, you can email jacobnails1@gmail.com or laurenzhao@gmail.com or martinsigalo@gmail.com or the Argument Clinic Club podcast@gmail.com. And I'm pretty sure only one of those emails is real, but I could have guessed Jacob Nails is right on accident. I will leave it up to the gods for us to know whether or not it was. So, before we continue, I also wanted to give some special shout-outs to some people. I want to give a special shout-out to Uma Memon and a special shout-out to Nick Montecalvo, two people that I've seen at Florida tournaments that have complimented me on the podcast. Thank you. Would you like to also thank our lovely people, Lawrence?
I have no idea who you are, but your support is greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Nick and Montecalvo, in fact, said to me that I had, quote, surprising charisma, which is, I think, depending on how you look at it, a compliment.
I don't think it is, but okay.
Okay. Well, you're allowed to think whatever you'd like. So for this episode, our plan was just to talk about the Woodward tournament and novice debate in general. For many of you who are novices, you will be coming to the end of your novice year. And for those of you, and a lot of you can remember what it was like to be a novice kind of at the end of your novice year. So I guess one thing that we can do to start is to ask you, Jacob. Jacob, when you were a Lincoln Douglas novice, how did that year go?
I felt like it went well. Objectively, I was probably a pretty terrible debater, but I was mostly debating at small tournaments with other very terrible debaters, and so I felt like my performance at those tournaments was actually pretty fine. I'm confident that by the end of my novice year, I didn't know basic things like what warrants were and like what carded evidence looked like. I was still of the I'm going to quote a person what's the word I'm looking for? Paraphrasing, and I still talked about Immanuel Kant and his support of utilitarianism and other basic mistakes. I was a late bloomer, I'll say that, and leave it there.
So you competed on the local circuit, as we all did, our novice year especially. So where did you go to school?
I went to Stars Mill High School in Georgia.
In Georgia, just in the entirety of Georgia?
Yeah, it occupies the entirety of Georgia.
Okay, that's good. So Lawrence, tell us about your novice year. How many state championships had you won by then?
Zero.
How about by the end of the following year?
1.
Okay, let's circle back to novice year to get us into the situation where we could get to win some state championships.
Okay, so this is probably when I didn't take debate that seriously yet because I was still playing soccer or whatnot.
You played soccer?
Believe it or not.
I knew that about Lawrence.
I definitely didn't.
Okay, well, so
Martin was more of a football player.
Yeah, well, yeah, in some senses.
Is that a new word for Magic of the Gathering?
That's what all the cool kids are calling it these days.
I see.
Yeah, so I went to my first novice tournament, and in Oklahoma, there's only 4 prelims on the first day. So I just showed up, won those 4 prelims, and then didn't come back the next day because I wanted to play a soccer match.
4 prelims on the first day. My first
the
tournament
first
as a novice
day?
had 3 prelims for the entire tournament.
Oh, that is
And
upsetting.
no elims.
Oh yeah, there's 4 prelims on the first day, and then breaks to out rounds because the second day is all IEs.
I still
as well.
find it absolutely bananas that your local tournaments had out rounds. We had no local tournaments without rounds. The Catholic Forensic League tournaments that we had were 4 rounds, and then you get ranked. And a lot of times, those rounds were not powered, which meant that at the novice-only CFL that we had as CFL 2, only the top speaking 4-0s got an award. My kid was one of them was a well-speaking 3-1 who was 7th, and therefore did not receive a trophy. So you got 4 W's to start your career, and then you
Yes.
just took a victory lap and conceded during the rest of your rounds by going to play soccer.
Yeah. So, I remember the last round of that night was I read my AF. The kid got up, asked one cross-ex question. I answered it, and then he was like, "Yeah, I'm done. This case was too good. I just concede. I have no more questions left." And so the judge cross-exed me and then debated me.
That was not how I expected that story to go.
And then gave me the W. And I was like,
What
"Oh,
if they
sweet."
gave you the L, dude?
You're so bad. You lost to the judge. Yeah, and then the next tournament I went to in novice, I went 2-2, and then all my teammates beat me, and I was like, yeah, okay, time to step up my game. Whoopsies.
That is an insane story about getting cross-examined by the judge.
They cross-exed me for like 5 minutes. They were just like, let's talk about your AF, and I was like, let's not.
Well, my novice year, I went to a couple nationally tournaments, and I would say above average at those. Looking back on it, there were some things that I had surprising clarity about as a novice, like what the core issues of the debate were. But I think that I was also incredibly lazy and therefore refused to go for more than one argument out of just refusal to think about it. I just focused in on it. But as a novice, that was actually a pretty good trait to have, because especially for a lot of the persuasion oriented judges, I would just be like, "Look, judge, I'm just going to talk about this one contention argument that I like for 3 minutes," and then the judges are like, "Oh, that's fair." I understood that point. And I kind of didn't even need to be told it to collapse back then, because I just was too lazy to go for more than one thing ever. And then in the second semester, I got a large quantity of losses. I think my novice year, one of my favorite memories was that I went to qualifications to CFL Nationals as a 9th grader. And as we were driving to the tournament, I realized that the tournament I was qualifying for conflicted with the trip we were taking over the summer, and therefore could not go. However, unfortunately, I found myself in a position where I had won a lot of my prelim rounds. So I was in a elimination round debate to qualify to CFL Nationals, but I knew I had to throw the debate. But the thing is, I couldn't concede, because if I just conceded the debate, they would take me out of the pool. But how it worked at that tournament was there were 6 qualification to nationals. It broke to a quarterfinals, which is a top 8. So what happens is 2 sets of 4 people debate each other. Those 4 the people that win qualify to nationals. But the people that lose then debate each other, and the winners of those rounds qualify to nationals. And we still had some teammates that were much older than me that were still in. So I couldn't immediately concede. I had to debate, but I really had to lose. So I would do things like I would read a thing and my opponent would ask me a very light question about it, and then in cross-ex I would be like, "Yes, that contention is false." And then they were like, "Well, that wasn't really my question." I was like, "Well, this thing that I read is absolutely incorrect." And then I noticed in that round that my opponent had dropped one of my contentions, so I extended every contention except that one. It was good. I somehow managed to get all of the 3 judges to vote against me, at which point I was slated against one of my teammates because he had taken the L because he wasn't very good. Sorry, Andrew. And then he qualified to nationals, so that was a good novice story. Do you all have any other stories from your novice year? I have a fun one actually about the Woodward tournament that I want to save. Did you attend the Woodward tournament as a novice?
I did not attend the Woodward tournament as a novice.
But as a JVer, he did.
I did attend as a JVer.
How'd you do it in the junior varsity division, Jacob Nails?
I actually beat every single team I debated that was not from the Harvard Westlake School.
So you went 1-2?
2-4, actually.
2-4, I see. That makes sense. Did you attend the Woodward tournament, Scary Larry?
How I debated in Oklahoma. I went to like 2 tournaments out of state ever.
Well-
wait, except for NSTA Nationals.
Woodward, by the way, for those of you that don't know, is in Georgia and is a truly lovely tournament for first and second year LDers with excellent hospitality and top level competition that Lawrence was systematically excluded from by virtue of
Geography.
being an OU. Okay, so at the Woodward tournament, a couple stories from the Woodward tournament. So number one. Before the tournament, I had constructed a new case because I hated the neg case that I currently had. The case was around 5 minutes and mentioned the word morality a lot, and it was actually, I think the criterion was morality. So now the problem. So what happened was, though, at this tournament, I did not have the normal LD coach that I had, George Clemens. Shout out to George Clemens. Instead, we had the new public forum coach at our school, whose name is Mike Washer. Shout out to Mike Washer. So I said, this is the case I'm planning on reading. Mike looked at it and just said, what is morality? And I said, and I tried to give him an answer, and he's like, you can't really give an answer to the question, what is morality? So I really think that you should just scrap this thing that you worked on. I was like, oh no, I guess I'll read my sovereignty NC. Which it turned out did very well over the course of the tournament. The second story I had was that I was 4-1 at one point during the tournament. And because I was so happy that I was going to break, I told my 6th round opponent, who was in a bubble round, what my case said before the round started. And then I asked him, out of the generosity of his heart, to tell me what his case said, and he said that he was interested in winning the debate, and therefore would not tell me. And that sort of Machiavellian move really rattled me to my core. And then
did you win that debate though?
No, I did not win. My opponent was better than me. So I also. Now, the last story was a story about the elimination round. So I was unfamiliar completely with any form of progressive argumentation, including a disad or a disadvantage. So one of my varsity members, so I was the 16th seed, which for those of you that don't know, in an octafinal round is the lowest that you can while still breaking. And the way that it works is I was slotted against the top speaking 6-0 debater, who was a certain debater named Jordan Lamoth. Shout out to Jordan Lamoth. And so I was advised by one of the varsity people that we had at the tournament, I believe, who was there. I was advised that I should read a disad, but I was told that I would need to read an impact because the impact was not in the disad. I assume they made some attempt to explain to me what a disad was, although this was entirely lost on me. So I, of course, read the disad in my round without reading an impact, and of course immediately forgot about it and refused to talk about it. The argument that I extended in this debate was the argument that you can still call the resolution unjust and then do it for pragmatic reasons, which was not enough to persuade any of the judges of that thing. And one small wrinkle about that round that was funny was 2 of the 3 judges who were scheduled to show up showed up, and so people were people were wondering about walking around trying to find another judge. And then one of the tournament people came in, saw one of the spectators, and said, "You do second year LD, right?" And the kid was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You've been eliminated, right?" And the kid said, "Yeah." And so he said, "Can you just judge this round?" And the kid was like, "I guess." And so the third judge for this round was this random second year that happened to be in the audience, who was of course wearing full debate garb. He also dropped me as any reasonable human would have. I was dead in the water.
Garbage.
I was garbage. That's true. Lawrence, do you have any other funny stories from your novice year? I have way too many. I was definitely a meme.
Not really, nah.
How about you, Jacob?
No, I feel like my novice year was pretty uneventful.
Do you just remember some funny arguments that you made that were like particularly heinous?
I feel like my novice year, I made some relatively standard arguments.
As an argument about the standards?
I didn't know the word standard yet. We had value criteria, and only value criteria.
Criteria? Plural? Interesting.
Yeah. Well, no, we collectively across all of our cases in Georgia. Any individual has a value criteria.
Yeah, I was like really confused there.
No, I didn't
seen
have
people with
criteria.
multiple value criteria.
I've seen this once. It didn't go over well.
I saw someone with a multi-pronged value criterion that ended up getting third at the NSDA national tournament.
Wow.
in the round that I had with him, I made the argument that he causes terrorism and that was really bad. And then my opponent did not answer it at all. And in the 2N, I talked about it for about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And my judges wrote everything down. And then my opponent did not talk about it in the 2AR at all. And then their ballots did not mention this issue. And I felt like I was in a weird Twilight Zone universe where this thing that I was talking about that they were, studiously writing down just like was not registering. And I remember at a certain point it became pleading. I was like, look at this thing. My opponent causes terrorist attacks. Please, God. This directly turns their case. I definitely win. And after a while, I was like, I guess I've done enough here. But apparently, I had not. Shout out to the great state of Idaho, where this kid made sure to inform everyone that he was from. So I'm thinking about one thing my novice year. One was that I was pretty bad when it comes to trash talk. I remember I once got out of a round that I had lost, and I proclaimed to my team that in fact I should not have lost, and that debating my opponent was like shooting fish in a barrel. Which is a old-timey phrase which means something that is easy to do and violent. However, my opponent probably easily dispatched me, unfortunately. I remember at one point in Cross-X telling my opponent in very sullen, graven tones not to twist their words. I don't remember what the context for this was, but I do remember that this was an Elam round and that I won.
I remember my novice year. I had an Elam round, and I picked up on a 2-1. And the one judge who voted against me, I was just like, that judge must not know anything. And the other two judges voted for me. I was like, I like these judges. Much later, I discovered that one judge who voted against me was a very qualified judge. I probably should have respected the RFDO. And the two judges voted for me were parents who probably hadn't followed more than like a debate or two in their life. And it makes me question strongly whether I deserve to win that Elam round. But a win's a win.
Oh, a win is a win. Now, the next pairing for the next round is out, which means that I will need to go coach some of my fine children. We will resume this podcast at some point. So see you later. Welcome to the second segment of our Woodward podcast episode. By now, the tournament has, I believe, mostly concluded, at least in the Lincoln Douglas division. So, we were unable to get Jacob for the remainder of this podcast. So, I'd like our new podcast co-host to introduce yourself.
This is Brent Wong, also Stars Mill High School.
Okay, so Brent, did you know Jacob at all?
Yeah, we went to the same high school and graduated the same year.
Good stuff. We had him on earlier. He was an engaging and helpful contributor to the details of our podcast. So
I find that hard to believe.
So Jacob didn't have that many stories from his novice year, or certainly not the litany of stories that I managed to tell. So why don't you talk about some fun stories from your novice year? Did you, for example, attend the Woodward tournament, or is there something else that you'd want to mention?
Yes, in fact, my novice year I attended the Woodward tournament and I cleared and lost in octafinals.
Just like me.
Yes. In fact, I lost in octafinals because right before my final rebuttal, I misplaced my flow and just decided to go ahead and give my 2-0 without it. Needless to say, it did not turn out very well.
Well, that just means you're an enterprising young man.
Not enterprising enough to give a 2-0 off the cuff.
Well,
what is it? I did pick up one ballot.
Well, it's definitely more than I got. So okay. And any other fun novice stories or Jacob Nail stories? We would accept either of those two.
Probably my least successful round my novice year. It was, I think, my first or second tournament. I walked into a round against a debater who had this kind of convoluted-sounding feminism case about feminism and its relationship to nuclear power, most of which went over my head at the time. And so I decided that the most reasonable thing to do, because I already knew at least not to just drop things, was to just pull out files from my accordion folder at random and read them, and hope that they responded. Some of which might have just been Nietzsche cards that had nothing to do with anything the app had said. But I gave it my best, and my best did not succeed.
Okay, so you were defeated in this round?
I was vanquished.
Okay, so what is Nietzsche's relationship with feminism as far as you understand it? Displaced?
Nietzsche?
Twice removed?
Nietzsche said things that could be construed as answers, just in terms of on the flow, they were called answers to the app. The judge did not agree with that.
Oh, that's fair. So one story in particular that I wanted you to mention. Now, this is a story about Jacob Nails, who, of course, has left us. But I want to ask you about, there's a story that Jacob Nails often tells about one of the tournaments that he was in. He was at a tournament in, where was it, Alabama, a tournament at St. James.
The prestigious St. James Invitational. I was there as well, actually.
Okay, well, how did you do at the St. James Invitational?
I did pretty well. I didn't clear, but I was satisfied with my performance.
Okay, that's fair. And so would you tell me the saga of Jacob Nails at the St. James tournament? I think the world deserves to know.
Yeah, so this was semifinals of the St. James tournament. For those who don't know, this was a finals bid, so the winner of this round would get a bid to the Tournament of Champions. And so a rather important round. And one would expect, quite falsely, to be a rather developed and good, legitimate round. The topic was animal rights. The app said animals had rights, and the negative said they did not. And so the affirmative gets up and gives a pretty generic case about why animals have rights, and the negative, this is Jacob, my teammate, on the negative, just reads his case about reciprocity and how a lion would eat you, so eat that lion back. Not the strongest argument if I say so myself. But read it as an NC. They read a bunch of turns to the affirmative case because the NC itself was pretty short. The AF was I don't want to be rude, but I don't think they're a particularly good debater. There's relatively, I think, new and inexperienced, and didn't answer most of the NC, and so seemed like what would have been a pretty clear decision on the flow for who had won because the AF dropped a whole lot. That being said, none of the judges in this bid round to the Tournament of Champions seem to be flowing this round. One judge decided at the conclusion of the round, immediately at the conclusion of the round, that they vote affirmative. They announce this immediately, as the other two judges are deliberating. They say, all right, I thought I was going to vote negative, but the 2A really wrapped it up for me, so I vote F.
So I just want to step in and clarify to the listeners at home that this is a highly abnormal thing to do.
Yes.
That normally when you have a set of 3 judges who are all supposed to come to a decision, each one, for objectivity reasons, come to their decision separately and then announces it to the audience and then kind of goes there one by one. But what you're saying is that Jacob experiences a horrible situation remarkably distanced from this fine feature.
That is correct. The other judges didn't really seem to know what to do with this fact. They're just like, uh-oh, do we have to go now? To which some other people are just like, no, take your time. and they do. The second judge comes back, and about 5 minutes later, he's like, all right, I'm ready to go. Doesn't wait for the third judge. Just goes ahead and delivers his RFD.
Reason for decision.
Yes. RFD stands for a reason for decision, so why you voted one way or the other. And this judge doesn't reference, again, the arguments that were made in the round or anything like that. He just didn't like cross-ex. There was a cross-ex exchange where the negative had asked the AF, so you think animals have rights. You think we're no better than bugs. And the AF was like, yeah, sure. And this judge was somewhat indignant that he'd been analogized to a bug. And so he voted for the negative on that grounds. He just couldn't get past the bug remark.
Okay, so at this point we have one judge that voted affirmative and one judge voted negative, which leaves just the final judge.
Yes.
But I do want to say, which side were you in this round? Or sorry, you were not present. You didn't clear.
I
But
was spectating the round.
you were spectating the debate.
I had a first row seat.
A front row seat.
This spectacle.
Okay, and so what side was your teammate?
Jacob was negative.
Jacob was negative. Okay.
So I was pulling for the negative here, but it's somewhat uncertain. One judge has voted affirmative, one judge has voted negative, one judge has not yet decided the round, and we're all waiting with bated breath for this, I think probably 75-year-old man to sit in the back of the room thinking about the round. Another 5, probably maybe 10 minutes pass. This judge finally says, all right, I'm ready to go now. He also voted negative. Somewhat predictable at this point, not on any of the arguments actually made in the round. He only makes one comment. It's actually unclear to me to this day whether this was meant to be his reason for decision, or if he simply had no reason for decision, and this is an idle comment he made. But the only thing he said during the period in which he was trying to explain why he voted negative was to point out to the affirmative that the affirmative had been mispronouncing the negatives criterion for the entirety of the debate, and rather than saying reciprocity, had been saying reciprocity. So as far as I can tell, Jacob got his first bid ever to the Tournament of Champions because his opponent mispronounced the word reciprocity.
Well, that was tremendous. So, so you being a spectator to this fine result, were no doubt enamored with the decision.
I was elated.
You were positively elated. Yes. Okay. So, Lawrence, do you still exist?
Yes.
Anything else?
No.
No. Lawrence is satisfied with what Agamben calls bare life, and therefore merely exists as an instrument to be disposed of and used as capital, as far as I understand it.
How is that related, if at all, to what the Jungle Book calls the bare necessities?
the bare necessities. Well, at least the funny thing about that song is that it has two different use of the word bare, and the one that kids wouldn't actually know is the same spelling as the one that Agamben uses.
So highly related.
Highly related, yes. Would you say you're highly related, Lawrence?
No.
I'm sorry, we couldn't quite hear you.
No.
We still couldn't quite hear you.
Oh my goodness. No.
There we go.
Okay.
See, that was more reasonable. So we are currently sitting in a boardroom at the Woodward tournament where where multiple final rounds have taken place, and I will say that Jacob, who Rip has left us, and myself and Lawrence were all on a panel together to determine the final round of the Woodward tournament in junior varsity debate. And although Jacob and Lawrence were judging the finals of the novice division, I was there in spirit because Lawrence just added me to the email chain for no reason, hilariously. So given that Jacob isn't here, I feel that I can say that at one point during the tournament we both were judging an elimination round, and he made entirely the wrong decision. And if only he were here to defend himself, then maybe he could. But
It was probably indefensible.
Probably indefensible.
I wouldn't trust anything he said.
I couldn't agree more. Would you like to defend the absent Jacob Lawrence, or is it going to be a 3-0 against Jacob Nails?
There's nothing that Jacob does that is defensible.
That's fair. Okay, so if you all could pick a major comment for someone at the end of their novice year, so they want to so they are going into their second year of debate. For a lot of people, that means going from the novice division at tournaments into the varsity division. And people will transition over the summer. They'll take some time to prepare. What do you think is the best thing for novices in particular to do over the summer to prepare for their second year of debate? We'll start with Lawrence.
Oh, dang.
And we will go in a semicircle this way.
Yeah, the listeners can really see which way you pointed.
That way.
To
They also
clarify,
don't know where we're seated.
he pointed in a clockwise direction, which I'm sure is more than enough to clarify.
More than enough, yes.
More than enough.
Very unhelpful, but
Okay, so I really enjoyed the Woodward tournament. This is actually the second JV Novice National tournament I've judged in the last 2 weeks, ridiculously. And I've really enjoyed a lot of these rounds because they show like a lot of promise, a lot of talent, a lot of skill. But I'd say the number one thing that sort of irks me about these tournaments is that so many novices are not doing their own preparation, and so they're reading prep by other people, and that they don't really understand. And so I addressed this actually a few days ago in an article I put out called The Case for Novice Packets, where I attempt to make a case for why novices should read evidence from like a tournament selected packet. You can read about that some other place.
wait,
But
you're the thing that you're imploring people to do.
Yeah, so-
in response to them just reading a bunch of stuff that they didn't write is just give people an exhaustive list of things they can say?
Well, so I'll clarify two things.
That you read
One
from?
is it's a second best option because it solves the problem of coaches' evidence and that they don't understand, and it's just core topic evidence. And number two is the point of the novice packet is that novices are supposed to cut their own prep and then submit that to the novice packet.
Oh, okay. I'm just used to different evidence packets.
Yeah, it's modeled in
have a
policy,
collection
but it's
of
not
evidence.
policy. Yeah.
Okay.
But and so one of the things that again really bothers me is that novices, like, it's okay to take the L at a novice tournament because you don't know exactly what's going on, and I think it's better for you to just lose at these rounds, even though you could just read your coach's prep and win. And I think that's a better learning experience for these novices. And I'd say the number one piece of advice is over the summer is just do your own prep. So practice cutting cards, read books, read the literature, read philosophy, learn about the world, learn about international relations, learn about something, but don't just rely on other people's prep. The process of doing research and informing yourself about the world, I think, is the number one thing that novices can take away after this year.
All right.
I can go next. So I've attended this tournament a decent number of times, as far back as the distant year 2011. And I have felt overwhelmingly in my experience that this tournament and the JV division specifically might be the most overwhelmingly negative biased tournament I've seen. Just consistently the negative tends to win a lot here. And the best explanation I have is I think that a lot of the kids competing in the JV division seem to be at the level that they're good enough that they want to respond to every argument and they know, cover every argument that your opponent has made. So they're not making the mistakes novices can sometimes make of just not addressing things and losing on just sheer drops or inapplicability of the things that they're saying. But the thing that they haven't developed yet, and the thing that tends to favor the negative in these debates, is I think a lot of JVers have not developed the ability to pick and choose which arguments to go for, and they lack argument selection and strategic vision in the rounds. And so that tends to favor the negative because if the AF just extends everything that they've said and the negative tries to extend everything that they've said, the negative having more time tends to drop fewer things and extend more things and just win on that basis alone. And so one thing you really need to win as the affirmative and overcome that time skew is the ability to recognize which arguments are strategically necessary and which ones aren't in debate rounds, and only go for the necessary ones. And that's how you overcome that time skew, is if your 2AR doesn't go for everything, then it's not a problem that you don't have as much time as a 2NR did. And so I would suggest just trying to develop and just be more cognizant of how the arguments interact in the round, and not just reflexively thinking, they said something, I answer it, but choosing what arguments are most important, and if I don't have enough time to say answer all 7 minutes in 4 minutes, or all 6 minutes in 3 minutes of my 2AR, which ones do I need to triage, and which ones do I need to keep in my 2AR, and select based on more than simply just trying to respond to everything.
Would one way of doing this be watching rounds and then trying to think, stopping the round before the 2AR or maybe the 1AR and trying to think, these are the arguments that I'm going to go for, and sort of make decisions based off of those rounds that you watch?
That does sound very helpful, yes.
All right.
So we have done a podcast on that you may or may not have listened to about issue selection, and basically issue selection is on kind of learning that, and the things that we discussed in that episode are particularly important. The last question I have for you is when you say triage, is that just like a French way of saying tree?
Yes.
Okay, good. So the comment that I would have going into the second year, I've taught a lot of people going into their second year of debate, and I think the major thing that you all need to think about, like I could tell you some content thing, I could tell you some like specific skill that you could improve at, I could tell you something to learn, but I think that the most important thing to realize is that going into your second year of debate can be very overwhelming. There's a lot of things that you can learn about Lincoln Douglas debate just in the time between your second and third year, and really all the time. But in particular, between your first and second year, there's a lot of stuff that people feel kind of the need to improve on. And the key is just to make sure that you don't get overwhelmed by the quantity of that. The LD can be a very broad and kind of all-encompassing activity, and with a lot of knowledge that goes in every direction. So what I am recommending is that you kind of don't try and do everything at once. Try and pace yourself. Maybe create a schedule for yourself of this time I'm going to do this time I'm going to do this time I'm going to do this. Make choices about how you spend your time. Learn to manage your time with respect to learning and preparation. And really helping to create a schedule for yourself and figuring out that stuff is maybe the most important thing that you can do between this year and next year. Now, the things that Lawrence and not Jacob said were pretty important. And I would just want to add to those the idea that it's important to kind of set your own schedule and things like that. Okay, so we all know that novices say the darndest things. So I'm wondering if you all can remember, in particular, any funny things that a novice, without naming names, of course, has said. I will go first. This was not in a debate that I watched, but I did think it was humorous that one of my students during a practice debate said that he said that it was bad that his opponent's arguments, quote, collided with each other. I thought that was fairly humorous. So at a previous Woodward tournament, a couple years ago, I think, I watched a debater and the 1AR had just ended, and then the negative debater said, "Judge, I would like to absorb the last 2 minutes of prep time." And I just found that hilarious because of the use of the word absorb. So I'm interested if you all have any fond memories of things from this tournament.
I don't have any, but I'm going to cede all of my time so not Jacob can tell us all of his stories.
It's Brent, thanks. I had a round where a debater, names won't be named, they're from Pond Lowland High School, had announced before the round, and I quote, "I was worried my opponent had so much chest hair."
Oh,
Which is apparently a strong indicator of debate skill.
I have another funny story about one of, this is actually the same student but that did the other thing. So I'm kind of walking through the halls, checking on my kids, and I see that one of my kids, his debate is done. This is in the first round. So I open the door, and the first thing that I hear from the other kid is, what are you running on neg? And my debater says, "Well," and then I had to jump in and say, "No." Now this kid has had maintained consistently that he was about to say, "Well, I'm not going to tell you," but who really knows what he see, because this kid is a really tremendous and friendly kid. He's so friendly. So this is definitely in range for him. I don't want this to just be about the kids that I coached, because I didn't judge that many rounds at this tournament. But Lawrence, aka Scary Larry over here, judged a ton of rounds. So, do you have anything?
I don't remember. I wrote down a few quotes, but I deleted the flows because
You deleted the flows?
Yeah.
Wait, one more thing. I want to make it clear to you all at home that Lawrence has a spreadsheet of the rounds all the rounds he's ever judged, right?
Yeah.
And would you like to describe the spreadsheet to the folks at home?
I mean, it's about as detailed as I think any spreadsheet tracking debate rounds has ever been. It tracks sit percentage per topic, and then overall by out rounds, and then
when you say
prelim
percentage,
wins. Like how often I sit out of how many out rounds possible I've judged. Which is around.
I literally did not know that you had that on your spreadsheet.
Yeah, it's currently hovering somewhere in the 10% range, I think.
The word immaculate comes to mind.
It's
when the spreadsheet is opened.
Yeah, you can click on.
Is that when you personally are immaculate?
Yes, I'm immaculate, and you can click on the names of each debater that I've judged, and it will take them to the tab room page of
God!
For each tournament that they're at. It tracks speaker point averages, win loss average.
Every time I hear about the spreadsheet, I find some new fact about it that is extra.
I built it while the power went out at LAX, and I had nothing better to do for 2 hours.
That's not an excuse. You had way better things to do.
It raises questions
anything
such as, who would make this and why?
Yes. Every time I hear about this spreadsheet, it's morphed into something else. I constantly metastasize. I'm convinced that like new statistics things just like happen overnight, and Lawrence is just too scared of his computer to try and figure out where they come from.
I think Nate Silver is to politics. Lawrence is to Lawrence's own debate round.
If you have ever heard the word extra used in a sentence, usually the people that use the word extra are themselves extra. It's one of those words where the only person that knows what it means is it applies to. But anyway, Lawrence, your spreadsheet is extra.
Yeah. It also has a search function where you can search by debater how many times I've judged them and how many times I've voted for them.
Jesus Christ.
If only Excel had a built-in search function.
Well, this one is because you have to track how many wins they have, and that requires a relatively long count ifs because it has to count across years.
Right.
Brent, what is your personal relationship with spreadsheets?
You use
It's
it?
it's decidedly mixed. They're a necessity, but one I begrudgingly accept.
What do you think Jacob's opinions on spreadsheets are? Specifically, the relationship with spreadsheets. My impression of Jacob is that if he ever touched a spreadsheet, his fingers would light on fire.
No. I've played many board games with Jacob, who is not here, on a spreadsheet because he doesn't want to pay for the actual board game. So what does he do? He creates a checkerboard or a Connect Four board or tic-tac-toe board or literally any other board using a spreadsheet. So I still have, I think I still have a Battleship spreadsheet, a template saved to my computer.
I can verify that. I as well have played many board games with Jacob on an Excel spreadsheet. It's a naturally
I don't even know what I
conducive
can say to
format to board games because it's got rows, columns, easily arranged into squares, as most board games are.
You could acquire a board game.
Money.
Well, I know that money exists.
It costs money.
That's a good point, Lauren.
What? The fact
board game.
Excel spreadsheets cost money?
No, the board games. Why would you get a board game?
Board
It costs
games are
money.
pretty pricey.
You said it, which is singular though.
I said money. That's
That was a sentence fragment. You're inferring a lot.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed listening to the Woodward episode of the Argument Clinic podcast. You can follow Brent Huang on SoundCloud, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram and Snapchat. You can follow Jacob Nails at yahoo.com, and you can find him at trolling around chess.com or Yahoo Answers. If someone's responding anonymously to something on Quora, it's probably him. And Lawrence Zhao can be found at scarylarry4242 at gmail.com. If you have any complaints, please email the Argument Clinic podcast at gmail.com. That one's actually real. If you have even more damaging complaints, jacobnails1 at gmail.com is where you should direct your concerns to. And you can also email me at martinsigalo2121212121 at hotmail.net, and that will just instantly give you a virus. Anything you all want to do? Do you all want to have a mini debate, or do you think that is unnecessary? That is the only important segment of our podcast, after all.
I think with Jacob here, or sorry, Brent. My bad. You and Brent.
For those of you that haven't figured it out, the funny thing is that there is actually Brent Huang in the room, but he has actually said nothing and has been staring at us the whole time. Well, Jacob over here has been slandering his good name.
I've gotten some very judgmental classes.
I do believe that a mini debate is necessary between Jacob and Martin.
Wait, no. I think there should be a debate between Jacob and Brent.
Oh,
I have a
we should get
very
him.
all right. I do have a very good topic. This is Jacob, by the way. But I've changed my views. I actually think that agent counter plans are a really good idea.
Okay, so Jacob over here says agent counterplans are good. Now we have Brent here, who really does not like the agent counterplan. Now, of course, a lot of our listeners do not know what a counterplan is or an agent, which means that this debate will have to be as, let's just say, as bare bones as they come. But all right. So I will. Okay. So Jacob has the first suggestion. Actually, no. I'll give it to Brent. Brent does not like the agent counterplan.
This is true. So a counterplan, for those who are unfamiliar, is an argument the negative presents, which is just the negative saying, I don't like the affirmative plan, not necessarily because the status quo, which is what we're doing right now, is a better idea.
We have 52 seconds left.
But
You're
because
constructive.
exposition is important. But because
49.
some other option, the counterplan is preferable. So you say, if the app said something like, we should eat at McDonald's, the negative might say, you're right, we shouldn't stay at home and just eat nothing and starve to death. But maybe there's better restaurants than McDonald's, and that would be a counterplan. And so counterplans function as opportunity costs. So they show that the affirmative costs us the opportunity to do something else. The problem with the agent counterplan, also known as the devil's counterplan, is that...
Also known as Satan's counterplan and Lucifer's counterplan.
Yeah, those are all valid synonyms, which I think any judge would readily accept.
Can you imagine that in an order? You're like core clog, Satan's counter plan, and then the AC.
That's the instant 30 speaker points for me.
Oh yeah, okay.
The problem with the agent counterplan is it doesn't present an opportunity cost because if you're discussing when another agent, I guess I should backtrack for a second. I'm going to define this term. Agent counterplan is when the negative says some other agent should just do the thing that the app is saying. And the problem with that logic is it's not an opportunity cost. It's not like the affirmative agent of action, the person doing the resolution or the government doing the resolution, had that ability in the first place. The negative is just saying, like, wouldn't it be magical if this thing were to occur? And so I'll conclude with an example. Let's say the affirmative were saying something like, resolve, the U.S. should impose sanctions on North Korea to solve like, the North Korean crisis and the dictatorship and such that they have going on there. It doesn't seem too nice. And the negative introduced a counterplan that was like, counterplan, wouldn't it be great if North Korea just voluntarily instituted a multi-party democracy? Like, yeah, that would be great. I agree. The problem with that is it's not a relevant thing that the U.S. has the ability to do or decide on, and so it's just wishful thinking and not a valid objection to what the affirmative proposed. Jacob?
Okay, so I understand where you're coming from, but I can think of at least 3 reasons why agent counterplans are a good idea. The first thing is that they're incredibly common in policy, which means that there must be some sort of reasoning behind them. Agent counterplans, like the 50 states counterplan, are used all the time, and it seems very likely.
Did you say agent counterplans?
Agent counterplans
Okay.
are used
Okay, I'm just checking,
very commonly in policy, which means there must be some justification for them. And given how much LD and even PF are leaning towards policy, we might as well follow them all the way. Secondly, agent counterplans check back AF bias, which is extremely common at many local tournaments because affirmative always gets to speak last. And as a result, it is important to make sure that even if there isn't a logical reason behind them, there is still a fairness justified reason, which indicates that agent counterplans must be used in specific contexts in order to prevent AF bias. Finally, supposing that there were some sort of reason, I think that the logic behind why agent planner hands don't make sense only is relevant if we assume that decisions are real. And the issue is that if we consider that free will doesn't exist, then it doesn't make sense to say that then there's no such thing as making a decision, and opportunity costs aren't a relevant issue. It only matters insofar as we think that agent counterplans, we can still say that North Korea should do X, even though we know that they either will be determined or not determined to do it, and that seems like a relevant response to the question of whether or not there's any opportunity cost.
I think you really got me with that last one there. I think I Brent Wong, will have to once again concede that Jacob Nails is best to date arguments. Good round.
Oh, good stuff. You totally took the fun out of it. I was gonna have Lawrence vote for the winner, but it seems that the Brett Huang has shamefully conceded the debate.
I wouldn't mind if Lawrence chose to intervene on my behalf, regardless.
I voted for Jacob Nails.
Okay. Well, looks like it's a 2-0 or one question mark for Jacob Nails. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to another fine episode of the Argument Plenty podcast. I want to thank our sponsor, Victory Briefs, for everything that they do to make the podcast possible. And so what we do, Brent and Jacob respectively, at the end of every podcast, we always have our guests say stay frosty with an emphasis on the A. So you say stay frosty. And just to kind of, if you both could coordinate and say that at the same time to round out our podcast, I would be much appreciated.
How much of an emphasis on the A?
A lot.
Okay.
Ready? I would say about 2.5 seconds.
All right. Stay frosty.
Frosty.
This isn't an argument.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't. It's just contradiction.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
It is not.